This portion is called Shelach lecha, which means send for yourself. The Lord's instruction to Moses to send out the spies. Numbers chapter 13 verse 1 through to 15 verse 41. Now this portion has bookends, so to speak, that are related, which I'll explain a little later. It begins with the spies entering the land of Israel, or Canaan as it was then called, and it concludes with God's warning, you shall not stray after your heart and after your eyes. Chapter 15 verse 39. So the first thing that strikes me is the order in which God gives this warning. He mentions the heart first and then the eyes. But in the natural course of life, we usually see something with the eyes first and then desire it with the heart. After all, that's what advertising is all about. It's about getting us to see something so that we want it with our hearts. Maybe something we've never even thought of before, but we see it and we want it. But here, in this portion, God is indicating something much deeper than that. It's like this. We frequently see what is already in our hearts. We frequently see what is already in our hearts. Paul was referring to this profound phenomenon when he said, to the pure in heart, all things are pure. Titus chapter 1 verse 15. When we have purity within, we subconsciously recognize it. We see it around us. You know, we occasionally speak of pessimists. These are people who see the glass half empty. And optimists. These are people who see the same glass, half full. What is inside is what we see. Now, there's a moving story which illustrates this. When Simon Wiesenthal was in a concentration camp in World War II, there was a prisoner who had managed to smuggle in a Siddur, that's a Jewish prayer book. And he rented out this Siddur to prisoners, the spiritually thirsty, starving and thirsty prisoners, for 15 minutes at a time for a quarter of their day's already meagre rations. After the war, Wiesenthal said to a rabbi that he couldn't believe that this man had used his Siddur to benefit himself at the expense of others. But the rabbi explained that he must focus not on the person who made business with his Siddur, but on those who were willing to give up a share of their rations to merely hold the Siddur in their hands for a few moments. We see what is in our hearts. Unfortunately, for many of us, our natural inclination is to always see the problems, the negative, the glass half empty, the imperfections, the troubles. The problem, you see, is in our hearts. There just isn't enough light in them. Now, I said this portion has bookends that relate to one another. One, then, is this warning about straying after our hearts and eyes in that order. And the other bookend is an example of this error. 12 spies entered the land. 10 returned with a negative report, and 2, Caleb and Joshua, with a positive report. How could they all experience the same things yet see them so differently and draw completely opposite conclusions? After the deprivations of their captivity in Egypt and the wilderness journey to Canaan, the 10 spies anticipated the promised land as providing all of the worldly blessings they had dreamed of for 40 years. Because this desire was paramount in their hearts, they focused on the exceptionally large fruit produced there and longed for it, but were horrified by the giants and the amount of people that were dying. This was the sum of their report. Caleb and Joshua were on a higher plane. Their hearts were more filled with spiritual light than the others, and they consequently saw it differently. Their hearts were different. They were focused on the spiritual aspect of the land. They knew that this was the land of their forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that God had manifested in that land. Never mind about the size of the fruit or the giants or the apparent mortality rate. Here is the land of the divine presence. Before Caleb and Joshua entered the land, their impression was going to be full of light because their hearts were full of light. Even the supposed negatives could be seen as coming from God for whatever reason best known to him. Christians say, we know that all things work together for good with those that love God, who are the called according to his purpose. So the two bookends then. The eyes notice what the heart influences them to notice, and the 12 spies were an example of this. Now for us in these last days, as the end draws near, we are all aware that the wiles of the devil are increasing. His servants are everywhere in positions of power. They squat at all exit points, ready to film us, track us, forbid us, and above all, to try to control us. They have been seeking to corrupt our children since the mid to late 60s. That's 2 generations. Many of those corrupted minds are now in power. The glass certainly is half empty. But the good news is God opens the floodgates of blessing to compensate his children who live in this atmosphere. Believe it. What sort of general would allow his troops to be low on ammunition when the enemy has just received reinforcements? A very poor general, and God is not a poor general. God has anticipated this problem in advance. And once we know that, in our heart of hearts, we begin to see it with our eyes. In fact, all our senses are alerted to the surrounding chariots and blossom trees of God's orchard. We are surrounded on every side with fragrance, light, praise and glory. Pray for God to enlighten the heart to such a degree that all the senses are affected. Now, I clearly remember the day when I began to see colours in a different way. It wasn't that long ago, unfortunately, but I'm learning. And I'm smelling the flowers. I'm stopping to admire the clouds and wondering if that's the one on which he's going to return. One prophet said that the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord. Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 14. But remember, another prophet had heard the seraphim say, the earth is already filled with the glory of the Lord. Isaiah chapter 6 verse 3. You see, Habakkuk was talking about the important thing that we know it. Isaiah said it's already there. Habakkuk was saying one day everybody will know that the earth is filled with the glory of the Lord. Every heart will be enlightened and will see with different eyes. That can be us and must be us today in order to not just survive these times, but to thrive in these times. What a day to live in this really is. God is tipping the heavenly chalice of light onto his children. No wonder prophets and angels longed to see it and to be in it. We're here. Hallelujah.